SNHell, a look back at Saturday Night Live with your hosts, Matt and Keith. Brought to you by Lion's Den Audio Theater. Like and subscribe to Lion's Den Audio Theater for more Lion's Den goodness. And here are your hosts, Keith and Matt.
Saturday Night Live, or as it was known at the time, NBC's Saturday Night, episode 14, with host Desi Arnaz, originally aired on February 21st, 1976. And this week again, it's Keith and Matt, and we're doing a re-record of one of our lost episodes. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Doing good. Beautiful day in the city. Great to be back on Saturday night. Oh gosh, we're recording in October. It's so warm for October. We're getting that Acapulco Golds sunshine. I love that Acapulco Golds sunshine.
Desi Arnaz. I'm going to talk a bit about Desi. Desi Arnaz was born in Santiago, Cuba in 1917. His father was a wealthy man and was the city's mayor, but they lost everything during Batista's revolution and they fled to Florida. Their young Arnaz eventually became a band leader. He was cast in a Broadway show, Too Many Girls, and he did the movie. And it was during this that he met Lucille Ball and they formed a partnership. Desi made his mark musically via the popular trend at the time of Cuban music. And then he went on to co-produce and co-star in a well-known sitcom called I Love Lucy, which is undoubtedly one of the most popular sitcoms in television history.
I like how you said well-known.
I know. The art house sitcom. Desi, as Ricky Ricardo, was cemented in the public consciousness for generations to come. Desi Arnaz's real impact on television, though, was not as Lucille Ball's on-screen husband or even as her off-screen husband. He had no background in business, and he used this and what was seen as weaknesses to absolute brilliance. Higher ups at the networks and stuff sort of saw him as this semi-English speaking Cuban bongo player, but he used that and questioned why things were done a certain way. So he'd present an idea, and when the executives say, no, that's not how we do it, Desi Arnaz would then go off and do it. His contributions to the way television is done are enormous. A few things that he's credited with inventing in the realm of television and sitcoms is the 3-camera setup for filming shows. They still do that. The warm-up act, still doing that. Filming before a live studio audience, still doing that. Using film at all rather than kinetoscope. Placing sets side by side in a studio. Basic syndication. And the thing that has the most impact on our lives is the rerun. There were no reruns before 1951 when Desi Arnaz said, let's try to replay these episodes later. In the case of film, networks didn't want to spend the money. So he got permission to use film rather than kinetoscope if he fronted the cost, and he would front the cost. But he would get to keep the negatives, develop footage, and the rights to said footage. The higher-ups thought they found a sucker, and Desi laughed all the way to the bank. He and Lucy formed a production company called Desi Lou, and some of the other shows that were done beyond I Love Lucy were the Untouchables, Mannix, Mission Impossible, and the little show that nobody wanted called Star Trek. Now, some of these were done after Lucy bought Desi out, after they divorced in 1960, but the pair remained great friends for the rest of their lives. So what's going on with Desi Arnaz in 1976? He had retreated from doing anything regularly, semi-retirement. He was kind of set for life and performed and worked when he wanted. This episode was released as he was promoting his new autobiography called A Book, and it is available on Audible, and I think I'm going to put a link to a copy of this book if anybody's interested. At this point, Desi Arnaz is just a little bit under 60, but he's set for life.
I want the Audible version of his book that he reads.
I sadly don't know if he reads it.
I'm sure he does. He's been deceased for too long. But can you imagine listening to him read his own book? I'd pay 2 credits.
For sure, yeah. I'd almost use cash and be that interested. And also tonight joining us, kind of the musical guest, is Desi Arnaz Jr. He was born in 1953, one of the first babies born to like a uber famous celebrity television couple. He followed his parents into entertainment as a musician and an actor. He had some acclaim, especially as a musician. But he's the son of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and those are tough shadows to ever step out of. And to be honest, I'm not sure if he really ever wanted to. Certainly a talented musician.
Yeah, look, I don't know him. We don't text, but when I look at him, he has such a friendly face. He looks like a nice guy. I don't know anything about him, but to look at him, I'm like, oh, what a nice guy. What a nice young man.
Yeah,
That's the vibe, his vibe for me.
I'm really excited about this. As some of you know, I mean, Jesus, we're doing a podcast. I'm obviously a TV history nut. And Desi is a legend. I said in the teaser from the last episode, he's legend with a capital L. Just really excited to go through this one.
I had no idea that he pioneered the 3-camera setup. That's really cool.
I think he just went in there and said, why is everything being done this way when we can do it this way? And now we all do it that way and shake our heads at how it was ever done any differently.
It takes a kind of person to be able to pull that off. I mean, I think you can see it in this episode. What a charismatic fella. Like when he speaks, you listen.
Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of these are credited to Lucy and Desi, and it's possible that she certainly had a lot to do with it.
You're absolutely right. I shouldn't have just given him all the credit.
No, but
to both of them.
She gives him all the credit. She says she didn't do any of that, you know. So
but he was gone when Star Trek came. That would have been after the divorce.
Yeah, he was out of the picture by that point. So getting on with the show here, cold opening. It's Chevy Chase as Gerald Ford visiting a psychiatrist, played by Dan Aykroyd. There's just a lot of slapsticky fun and physical comedy, playing with bits about laying down. Chevy lays on the floor, then he lays awkwardly on the couch. This had a real old-timey Marx Brothers, Three Stooges kind of feel to it. And then Chevy bursts through the wall and does a live from New York.
I don't think it's just because it's topical. I mean, we haven't even watched this in a while, and I'm still sick of his Ford impression.
It might be time to put Ford to bed for a bit, yeah.
He loses the election, right? Well, he doesn't. Wait, what? You know what? They'll tell us in Weekend Update. Let's not spoil the presidential election from the 70s.
So then we have the Desi Arnaz monologue. He gets a huge crowd ovation. And his basic bit there is that he's really enjoying working with these young kids, and I think he calls them the
not ready for prime time yet.
Yeah, not ready for prime time yet. They gave him some cigars called Acapulco Gold, which he loves. They're obviously weed.
Can't stop smoking them.
He talks about passing it around and stuff like that. This is quick. It's charming. Like you said earlier, it's ridiculously charismatic. And I think this is the best of what Desi Arnaz can do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming into this for the record. I have seen maybe one episode of I Love Lucy ever, and I didn't even watch it all. So I really don't know Desi Arnaz well, except for what I've read about him, because like you, I just like to read the history sometimes of things like television and sitcoms and such. So of course I was familiar with him, and I knew, quote unquote, his act, but I never really watched that program. So I come into this all pretty ignorant of him. I mean, my first impression is, wow, to see him walk out smoking a cigar on a small stage was like, imagine how that guy smells. You smell that 2 studios up, I'm sure.
Yeah. And he was a heavy cigar smoker. So then we go to a commercial with Garrett Morris as Reuben Hurricane Carter. It's a parody of the American Express commercials that were going on at the time, where you can basically use your card as identification wherever you go. Carter, of course, was incarcerated for life at that point in time. And we actually saw a serious bit with Morris's Reuben Carter a couple weeks before. This, to me, was absolutely hilarious. I thought it was funny as hell. I mean, it's a very serious context, but my goodness, everyone knew who Hurricane Carter was, and he was locked up and wasn't going anywhere at that point in time. So I got a good laugh out of this.
The crowd really popped for it. They were into it, if I may use the term popped for it. I noticed, I was watching it, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a hurricane, but it's good. And then, you know, the crowd energy really brought me into it, to be honest.
Yeah. So next bit, Chevy Chase and Jane Curtin are in bed together. It's his birthday, but sadly he couldn't get the little Chevy to salute. Jane says she's fine with it. She just wasn't fine with him sort of mauling her and taking her to bed. Her plan was to invite some people over. All of a sudden, there's all these people there for a surprise party, and Chevy's character is quite embarrassed. This was not great. This was kind of silly to me. I'm wondering, like, do Chevy and Jane have bad chemistry, or is this just bad stuff? But this is the second episode in a row where they played a couple, and it's just something I'm not jiving with.
It must be. I can't think of anything else it would be. And I mean, not that I think in this particular situation that replacing the actors would have had a very dramatic effect. This is a pretty shitty sketch. But you're right about those two. They don't, I don't know. I don't like looking at them together.
This premise is done really well in a early 90s short film called Bob's Birthday. Later went on to spawn Bob and Margaret, a cartoon that was nothing like the movie. We're 9 minutes in and we're on our fourth segment. This is really clipping along well. And our fourth segment is Lorraine Newman as Luciana Vermicelli sitting in a coffin. She was an ugly child and a hideous teenager. She's selling a beauty regime book about how she basically drinks the blood of children and replaces her bones with those of cheerleader. And she does it all with a Egyptian priest. Sadly, the priest seems to be missing, and that's the end of Luciana Vermicelli. This was not overly funny, but it was a good performance by Newman.
I agree completely. It wasn't full of jokes or anything, but I certainly enjoyed it. One of my favorite movies is Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this looks like a scene out of Bram Stoker's Dracula with the brides and the coming to life and the long white dresses. So I'm getting a lot of secondhand enjoyment from this. Damn, she was a great bride.
And as you pointed out, she was a horror fan.
Yes.
So this must have been a lot of fun for her. So next up is the literary recital. Dan Aykroyd hosts. He does a really good job as a bookish host. And his guest is, not his guest, but he presents Desi Arnaz, who is reading Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky. This, to me, was really, really funny. It didn't even seem rehearsed. Just hearing Desi with his thick accent reading the gibberish that is in Jabberwocky or Yabberwocky. Beware the yub bird and shun. A lot of fun. And then they say next week it's going to be Chaucer's Canterbury Tales being read by Charo.
I'd buy that for $1. I really like Desi's eyes when he's doing this are incredible. These are some of the most expressive eyes I've ever seen when those eyebrows shoot up and he's going through this. When I first watched this originally, I'm not familiar with the source material. I was like, okay, I get it. He has a funny accent. But he really did well. Like, he performed it very well. And I appreciated that more this time.
The next bit is Chevy Chase as Barry White. And it's a Barry White tribute. But instead of saying things that Barry White would say, it's very waspy stuff like tennis clubs and the like. Yeah, this was long. It wasn't overly funny. And I think this is the point where I finally said, let's start pulling Chevy back and giving other people stuff to do.
Yeah, there's no need of this. The sweat, too. Speaking of very white, there's something very white going on with Chevy Chase here. This man is dripping, and somebody, well, maybe that's, he's just doing the very white thing. No, that man is sweating. I've read the book. Anyway, I digress. This wasn't funny, and I think Chevy is high as a kite.
So, I mean, you've been supporter of Chevy more so than myself, and he has definitely showed stardom. But are we reaching a point where it's feeling to you like it's the Chevy Chase show and Chevy does whatever he wants and whatever he doesn't want to do, he might throw to someone else? Is that the feeling you're at right now?
Yes, I would agree with that. And I would cite a couple of things that, like I said on a previous episode, a conversation he had with Garrett Morris in the hallway. Like, hey, you're not really in the show that much tonight. And Garrett's like, yeah, I'm just happy to be here. That had to have happened at some point. Chevy has had that conversation in his life. I guarantee it. And like he knows it, and I think what we will later learn of Chevy being like a very a big and abrasive personality. So I have no doubt that he was throwing his will around. But you know what? The show's a hit, and he is the star. So at the same time, you got to look at the people behind the show and say, who gives a shit what he's like? This show is a hit. This guy is our star. So you naturally want to run with it. But eventually we come to a point like this where perhaps compromise is necessary, because for a couple of episodes now, Chevy's been in some sketches that just don't work for him personally. Weekend Update hasn't suffered at all because it suits him. But he's in stuff that he shouldn't be in, probably because they just want him in shit. Even though somebody else would be better, it's, no, you got to put Chevy in it. You got to put Chevy in it. Yeah, I know Dan Aykroyd would be better, but, you got to put Chevy in this one. And because, it's on third or whatever the hell excuse they might have. That's a rambling answer to say I agree with your synopsis. It's getting to be a bit much.
Our next bit is the I Love Lucy rejected pilots. Desi Arnaz comes out as himself and talks about how there were other versions of I Love Lucy before they went with I Love Lucy. And they found the footage and they're going to show some of these early pilots. So the first one is called I Saw Lucy. And throughout these, Desi Jr. plays his father. So this one is just basically Desi Jr. looks out the window and sees Lucy. Lucy never sees him, and the audience never gets to see Lucy on episodes of I Saw Lucy. And that was a problem. I laughed at this one.
Me too. Desi's good. Desi Jr. I'm sorry, I should say. I like him in these little bits.
Yeah, I'm noticing in this he doesn't use his father's accent, which is a big part of the character. But I'll actually talk a bit more about that in a minute. The second one was I Loathe Lucy with Gilda Radner as a very good Lucille Ball. Fortunately, she appears as Lucy throughout most of the episode. He's rude to her. He beats her up. He throws her around. He makes her stay home. Won't let her go to the club. And that's I Loathe Lucy. Like he throws scotch in her face at one point. Desi says the wear and tear on Lucy was rough. I know Dee was not a fan of this because of the abuse, but I also thought, taking the context of who they were doing and what the premise of the joke was, I thought it was quite funny. So we were at odds there.
Yeah, I agree completely about Gilda. I thought she was a great Lucy. And I was thinking about what you were saying about I Loathe Lucy. I mean, it's obviously... we're doing this. This is February 1976. Is that ish?
That's correct. Yeah, you're right.
So, I still think even then that they're just looking back at the stereotypes of the 50s and having fun with them. I really don't think this is mean-spirited at all. And especially with, two men that love her, they would never.
No.
They would never cross that line, especially with one of the most powerful men in the television business, historically, at least. I guess maybe, by 76, I'm not sure he's calling any shots, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I don't think there was a mean-spirited bit about this. I thought it was spinning the 50s in the 70s with loved ones. This is really, if you don't do it this way, how do you do it?
The next one was I Love Louie with Garrett Morris as Louis Armstrong. Unfortunately, it's a good idea, but Louis Armstrong belonged to another studio, and they couldn't get him for all the episodes, so they had to pass on that one. Garrett Morris's Louis Armstrong was hilarious.
Mm-hmm. He really hammed it up. Yeah, I love it. This was my favorite of these.
The next up was I Love Asparagus. It was a plate of asparagus sitting in for Lucy, and Ricky was talking to the asparagus until he ate it. This is the point where I started to think that this was probably written by Michael O'Donoghue. Desi says that the asparagus was a good idea, but all the vegetables would wilt under the hot light. So they had to go for a different idea.
Oh my god! Yeah, this was a good one too. While I might have preferred the Louis one, when Desi Jr. was just yelling at the asparagus, I thought this was perfect. It was, it's the kind of like absurdist humor I expect to see on like The Family Guy. It was really different. I loved it.
The next one was I Love Desi, featuring Desi Jr. and as Ricky, and Tom Schiller, Saturday Night Live writer Tom Schiller, also as Ricky, and they're just basically having a conversation about what's going on at the club that night. No, this is the one where Cesar Romero, I think, is coming over, and one of the Desis actually brought a moose in to make some chocolate mousse. Tom Schiller's impression of Ricky Ricardo, or Desi Arnaz, is actually better than Desi Jr.'s. He goes all out and does the accent and the voice and even the laugh, I think, at one point. This one, I thought this one was hilarious. I like them all. It's built well. Yeah,
I agree. This was a perfect use of the host. Great material. All the jokes were there. Yeah, it was just a home run. I spoiler alert, I just like this episode outside of that surprise sketch. Yeah, this is one of my contenders of the night. I really enjoyed it.
And Desi then also mentions a couple of other ideas ahead. I love loose change, and I think I love gas turbine engines, but no idea worked except I love Lucy. And he finishes the segment in something that it's actually a joke I didn't get, but you pointed out what the joke was.
This is my favorite part of the episode. I will tell you right now. I'll tell you at the end of the show. This is my favorite part of the episode. It gets no laughs Nobody laughs because I think everybody's a little heartbroken.
Yeah. So he says he wants to bring out someone really special, and the audience gasps, waiting for Lucy herself. But he brings up Willie Day, the prop master of the first 4 seasons of Saturday Night Live.
Brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah.
And he has such a mischievous look on his face. He knows, and I think for the audience at the time, the live audience, it was too real. They were like, "Ow." Dude, that was too harsh, but shit, I thought it was the highlight of the episode.
And the first time around, I mean, I watched this 3 times, I think, and I did not get that joke. I did not understand what was going on. Next segment, weekend update. Chevy Chase filling in for his sister Rita, who's on vacation. And who she was filling in for Chevy Chase. And the introduction is, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you are merely a statistic," which was really funny.
I think we should also mention that once again, we've led with a blowjob joke.
Yes, that's right. Broad strokes of some of the jokes here. A few jokes about the Democratic presidential primaries that are coming up. And it's funny, this is something you and I talked about briefly, Matt, but it's funny how little Jimmy Carter is a issue here. He goes on to win the primary, and he's not even one of the names that comes up much.
He's a sleeper. Also
mentions that Muhammad Ali, has been accused at this point of fighting sort of punching bag opponents, and he denies this and then announces that he'll be fighting Helen Hayes, an elderly actor at the time.
Was this legitimate criticism of Muhammad Ali? I don't watch boxing.
Yeah, it was. Ali was coming towards the end of his run as champion. He was kind of being put in there with, for the most part, less than fighters. Yeah.
Jobbers.
Then we have a re-airing of another commercial I really enjoyed. It was the Speed commercial from a previous episode with Ann Beats as a mother with 2 jobs, and just her delivery was brilliant on that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the sketch. I could have used more of her around. I mean, I know she's just a writer, and I'm sure there was a hierarchy and whatever, but I thought she did really well.
Yeah, that was tremendous. Like when I do see her do things, I forget that. I mean, I don't know what her acting background is, but she's in there as a writer. And then we go back to Weekend Update. They banned pay toilets in Iowa, and Iowans have been waiting for 5 years. They were relieved and celebrated the only way they knew how. And then there's a short clip of an old Betty Boop cartoon, which is demonstrating the goings-on at the Patty Hearst trial. It's a quick, uneventful Weekend Update.
Yeah, and I was fine with that, considering that that they got a lot to get to. Don't get me wrong, I really think something ahead should be cut short, but I don't think we needed a lot this episode.
Our next segment is Desi Arnaz Jr. comes out and talks about the different shows from Desilu and how his father enjoyed working on them all, but never got to appear on Untouchables until now. So there's now an episode of it's almost an episode length segment of the Untouchables, where Desi plays Raul Nidhi, a pusher of amphetamines to children, and he's being followed around by Dan Aykroyd, doing his impression of Robert Stack's Elliot Ness. Nidhi calls home and asks his wife Lucy to bring his gun, but tells her to remember not to bring the one with the blanks. She shows up at the warehouse with the gun in a violin case. It's Gilda again as Lucy. The police raid the place, and it's the gun with the blanks. There's no bullets. And so the Lucy is upset, and there's a bit of a shootout, and Lucy dies. And they then find Walter Winchell, who has been narrating the whole thing, played by George Coe, hiding behind some boxes. This was long. It was all over the place. I think they used 5 different sets. Aykroyd's Stack impression was great. George Coe's Walter Winchell impression was great. But this was a real mess, I thought.
Yeah, you'll recall perhaps me mentioning that there's something, when we were talking about Weekend Update, I said there's something ahead that I think shouldn't be so long. It was, of course, this.
Yeah.
I really liked Dan Aykroyd, and I really liked Gilda Radner's crying Lucy. That it still made me laugh, even though I was bored of the sketch and I wanted it to end. Gilda's a light.
You know, I like Untouchables, and it was well done in that sense, but I don't know, just too many sets, too much jumping all over the place. The best part for me is they used one of the regular kitchen sets, and it's just kind of a throwaway thing. Somebody says, what's the deal with this kitchen? And one of the other guys goes, oh, it's called the kitchen from the future, because it was all the kitchen of the future. It was all 70s decorated. But yeah, this was a low point of the episode for me, for sure.
Agreed.
So then we go to, it's another Lucy sketch, kind of. It's Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin are Lucy Ricardo and the best friend, neighbor, Ethel Mertz. Like in many episodes of the sitcom, Lucy was trying to sneak into Ricky's Tropicana Club, and she has different costumes she tries. It's a lot of quick changes for Gilda. So she eventually, she starts out dressed as a showgirl, then a mechanic, and then she hides in a bass violin case. And that's kind of the first bit of that, the Gilda and Jane stuff, which was fun. A bit too much Gilda as Lucy on this episode, but she's doing a great job.
Yeah, I was a little. This sketch didn't really work for me ultimately. I mean, it was fine, but and again, I'm familiar with I Love Lucy, the show, so Jane's character is just completely lost on me. But her running back and forth, like that's probably fun to see live. Her with the quick costume changes didn't do a lot for me in television retrospect senses. Yeah, the whole thing relies on her physical comedy, which she's great at, but she's all wrapped up in these costumes. She doesn't have a lot of opportunity for that either. So it's just her doing the voice through all these costumes.
The second half of the sketch for me actually is far better. It's actually taking place at the club, and it starts with virtually unrecognizable Lorraine Newman as a Cuban singer, and she introduces Ricky, who comes out, and it's Desi, of course. He sings one of his signature tunes, Cuban Pete, does a fantastic version of it, and then Lucy and Ethel enter in a cow costume. Desi knows who it is as soon as he sees the cow. I really enjoyed the second half.
Me too. Clearly the cow costume from the Dick Cavett episode.
Yes.
Literally the exact costume. And yeah, unofficial musical performance number 1. Yeah. And gosh, I really liked it. This is and I'm hard on the music in season 1, but this worked for me. I loved listening to it. I'd listen to more of that.
Yeah. We then go to a guy I'd never seen before standing in front of a red curtain, and it turns out it's Gary Weiss. He introduces his next film. Now, the audience gives Weiss a huge applause, so I think they're tracking with us that this is some fun stuff. Speaking of fun stuff, this is such a great little short film featuring Taylor Mead. And Mead was a poet and an actor and a sometime collaborator with Andy Warhol, something of an underground New York icon for decades. And the film is just Mead and his cat hanging out in his apartment, talking about how they're friends and how they bonded. And Mead talks about finding the cat in the hall when he was a kitten and bringing him in after a while. Then he gives the cat catnip. The cat gets ripped or bombed out of his mind, as Mead says. This is so far ahead of its time, this movie. It would be a huge hit. It would have been, it might not be, but it should be a huge hit on the internet today if it came around now. This is, Gary Weiss is amazing at capturing people. This was so friggin' entertaining.
Absolutely. A hit for me. Slice of life, late 70s New York. I've said several times, if I had a time machine, I'm going from 75 to 81 New York and just hanging around for a while. I've also begun to feel that way about early 90s Los Angeles, but that's another episode. But nevertheless, one of my favorite time periods of contemporary history, and he captures the slice of life of it so well that I'm already interested in the aesthetic and the period, and to have it presented like this so whimsically and artistically. Love it.
I think we get to see Taylor Mead again in another short film or later, and I'm looking forward to it. Our next segment is Desi Arnaz is a doctor who does Cuban acupuncture. John Belushi, who's been having migraines, comes in to see him. And Cuban acupuncture basically involves sticking cigars in a patient's ears and nose. This sketch was flat to me.
I can almost see them before the show, like getting it ready. And that they're kind of like pitching it to Desi. Well, we're in this one, you just stick a bunch of cigars in Belushi, and he's like, "Oh, I love it." And it's just him just enjoying the novel, and so like, okay, we guess we just go with it. That's my speculation, my wild speculation of how this sketch came about. And he's still smoking during it too. Gosh, the stink of the studio that night must have been something.
Yeah, I'm sure that studio had a hum a lot of the time, but the cigars would have been extra strong.
And Desi's not smoking that cheap shit. They're brought in from Toronto.
Yes, that's right. Chevy and Lorraine are at a restaurant and they talk about their relationship. Newman thinks they don't communicate well. And then Chevy lectures her with a lot of big gibberish words, explaining why their relationship is no good and why it has to end. This is really good delivery by Chevy. He's such an odd a selection of words. Many don't make sense. Belushi comes over and tries to be sort of a shoulder to cry on, and then he just drops some gibberish himself as well on Lorraine. Yeah, good delivery in this one. Nice and quick too.
Yeah, I like when they know, okay, we've done our joke. Let's get out. That's a skill to know that and not beat something into the ground. And some people got it, some people don't. So somebody knows what they're doing on the writing staff, certainly. I mean, I didn't love the whole sketch. I wasn't laughing through it or anything.
No,
but everybody was fine in it. I mean, like I said, I appreciate the here's our joke.
Exactly. Yeah. Our next bit is the Bisexual History Minute. Jane Curtin presents a story about Hester Catchpole, who holds her husband at gunpoint and then runs away with a female dressmaker and sets up a home above shop. And it ends with, and that's the way it was, which actually was Walter Cronkite's catchphrase at the time. Curtin was great with this. It's sort of making fun of the different sort of history minutes that were popping up during the bicentennial. Yeah, Curtin presents a really fun little story here. It was good. It wasn't overly funny, but it was good satire.
And perfect person to do it. Jane Curtin could have had a career on PBS. She should have been a PBS personality or presenter.
Talented woman. So Gilda Radner talks about Desi's new book, but she cries when she realizes how much it is about her. This is really just the segue into one of my favorite segments I've ever seen, probably ever on TV. And it's Desi Arnaz singing Babalu. That's his signature song. He's given it for the first time in a while, and probably the last time most people saw him do it. It actually takes up 2 segments of the show. He leads a conga line throughout the studio. Lorne Michaels, or Dave Wilson, one of them was making the camera cut to long shots because they thought Desi was going to die. He was giving it so much. Yeah, this was just, this was amazing. I was so happy to see this.
I mean, I'm in complete agreement. This man did this performance like it was the last time anybody was going to ever see him do it, which I'm sure was, for the most part, true. And he left such an impression. This was one of the most fun live performances I have ever seen on television. Absolutely counts as a musical performance. Gosh, it really blew me away. To be honest, his energy when they're running around the studio, it's clearly chaos. And Belushi is really into it. I don't know if you noticed him.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I was literally in awe when he was I loved him ripping his fucking tie off at the top of it while he was still going at the drum with the other hand. His son was obviously really into it. He had a big smile on his face the whole time. And I don't think that was just for television. It was, yeah, I think for people of a certain age bracket and then those outliers like you and I, this is absolutely got to be a piece of television history.
To me, this was it's funny in a way, this was like the endorsement, the old generation, because he's surrounded by cast members throughout the conga line and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is his endorsement to these young up and comers.
He didn't have to go that hard. He
No.
could have played it safe. He could have did his little bit. That man, oh my gosh, he poured himself into that. It was obvious. He was sweaty. He wanted to rip his shirt off. It was visceral.
And some of that is showmanship, like the tie coming off and looking up at the sky, fighting for breath. He was doing that when he was younger, but it doesn't mean he wasn't giving it every bit of himself. You know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean. I mean, of course, I'm not familiar with his younger performances. That's really interesting to hear. But I mean, you can't fake that sweat.
No, you can't. No. And I mean, he's white haired and he's only 60, but as we talked about at another time, he looked far older than that.
He absolutely did. Yeah. My father looks 20 years younger than him today, and he's like 67.
No, it was just a really nice, you see the cast giving it and loving it. Cute little bit of Gilda dressed as Lucy dancing with Tom Schiller dressed as Desi. The end there, he's still going at the end. Chevy's got an instrument. Garrett's yelling, "Hi, Mom," because he knows Mom's going to watch because it's Desi. Jane is dancing and screaming, and truly see people were having fun. My God, this was just a great moment in television history.
Yeah, it's my favorite few minutes of Saturday Night Live NBC Saturday Night so far that we've been watching. I have never been. It pumped me up.
Yeah. And what a great way to end the show too. You know,
when you're sitting at home at 1:30 in the morning, originally Desi Arnaz is pumping you up before you go to bed.
Yeah, I wonder. I'd love to know how long they went after the show. I can't imagine as soon as the cameras cut, shut it all down. You know?
No, they took that right to the after party.
I'll tell you, I'm a huge Don Pardo fan, and when he come on at the end with his little bit, you know, that he does over the closing credits, I was like, "Shut up, Don Pardo." This is his last major appearance where a lot of people would see him, and legends don't get to go out this way, and we often think they should. He's in front of an audience, and he's just entertaining a lot of them, giving them every bit of it. Son by his side, which is a nice touch, you know. It's just it was great.
Yeah, I loved the son element. I really, I mean, I know it was just incidental, but I think it brought some real sincerity to the proceedings. I think.
Yeah,
it kind of goes hand in hand with what I mentioned earlier about the "I Loathe Lucy" segment. Is the but that these two men were involved, speaking about a woman they have nothing but love and admiration for. You feel it.
And they even say goodnight to her. They yell goodnight to her. You know, goodnight, Lucy. Goodnight, Mom. You know, great moment. So the epilogue. This is it for Desi on the show. Although impressions of him will last for eternity. They're still doing them. Like I said, it's not his last actual appearance on TV, but it's definitely his last big prominent one. He was in semi-retirement. He taught classes in film production and acting at San Diego. He bred horses, and he was very involved in a lot of different charities and nonprofits. And Desi, he passed away in 1986.
And Lucy in 89.
Yeah, very close to one another.
Just like a married couple do.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't together.
You know, but there are videos of them in their, you know, I think it's Desi's, you know, declining years, you know, playing with the grandkids together. And I remember there's one where they're at a pool together, and it's just really, I don't know, they stayed close. Desi Arnaz Jr., we don't see him either. Very good musician, maybe excellent musician. You know, half-decent actor. He did well in film and TV until the early 90s, and then he kind of walked away. He runs a historical theater in Boulder City, Nevada, and he's very involved in civic affairs, nonprofit ventures, and maintaining his parents' legacy. You're right, he seems like a good dude.
Charming young man.
So we usually go in and talk about our thoughts of the music, but the music is so tied in with Desi and Desi Jr. We'll have to sort of do it a little differently today. So rating the host, I'll just go through some notes. It's Desi Arnaz was definitely past his prime as a performer, flat in a lot of sketches, but gave it his all in other ones. He's really enjoyed this evening, and it was obvious. We don't have stars like this anymore. You know, there's people with more Emmys, people that made more money. They just don't have the cash that Desi Arnaz and people of his ilk was. There was no competition back then. That's the big difference. You didn't have 800 channels and 41 streaming services. You had one channel, and you either watched it and knew who Desi was, or you didn't. These people like Desi and Lucy, Jackie Gleason, you just kind of entered the public consciousness in a way that no one had done before. Some of these characters people thought were actual real people who lived in a little box in your living room. All of that magic is gone. So for him at this stage of his life, at this point in entertainment as well, when a lot of that hokey 50 stuff was being seen as not good, he came out and joined the New Kids, gave it his all, gave his blessing to the show, obviously enjoyed himself, loved working with the kids, it seemed. You know, they try this later with other comedy legends from that earlier time, and they're kind of, as I wrote here, renowned assholes like Jerry Lewis and Milton Berle, and we don't get the same results. Desi was all in, and the show was made better for it. This was a joy to watch, top to bottom, even the bad stuff.
Agreed. Desi, he's at his best when he's doing like himself, of course. So I do feel like maybe I probably where you felt he was a little flat is probably corresponds well with what I would think he's doing with his characters. Not quite right. I really didn't like that Untouchables thing very much. I mean, I get why they did it. And what was the other one? The Belushi cigar thing, the Cuban acupuncture.
Yeah.
These are little things where he's just trying to play a character, and he succeeded immensely as himself. I mean, even in the show, he was kind of himself. So he knows his bread and butter.
Now, I said renowned assholes like Jerry Lewis and Milton Berle. I should probably say alleged renowned assholes like Jerry
Of
Lewis,
course.
because they are indeed alleged renowned assholes. And I can't wait to get to those episodes. We're going to see some anger coming out on this side of the mic. The worst sketch of the night for me was the cigar acupuncture. Where are you sitting, Matt?
My worst sketch was the Untouchables. I
Sure.
think at least cigar acupuncture. It didn't pain me for too long, but that thing just kept going.
The best sketch of the night or best element of the night, not musically. For me, as much as I loved the Desi stuff, it was a slow build to a great ending. But I'm going to put my best bit as actually the Gary Weiss film.
That surprises me.
I split, like I'm stricter with my split in my categories. And I consider the closing as my favorite musical performance. So I kind of split them a little more strictly than you do.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I said it when we hit it. I said my favorite moment of the night was the tease, the Lucy tease.
Yeah,
spoke to me on a comedic level. That I loved it. I'm the target audience for that.
The star of the night for you, Matt?
Desi.
Yeah, nice.
Brilliant. Like he enjoyed himself so much. That's what I loved to see. He was loving it. He brought the energy. I mean, that last segment is wow. And even when he was failing, it was just charming to watch him have so much fun, to be honest.
For sure. Again, with my my strictness to the categories, I went with Aykroyd. Sounding like a broken record here, but he gave us three very different performances tonight. The Psychiatrist, the Literary Masters host, and Robert Stack's the great Robert Stack impression.
Yeah, that was really good.
And he also looked super cool at the end. I don't know if you noticed him in his suit and shades with the scarf. He looked like a real lad about town.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I'll have to have a peek.
Yeah, at the end when they're all just kind of jiving with Desi there. I don't even think he did the conga line. I think he just kind of strolls out at the end, like almost like, "Hey, what's going on? Oh, cool! It's Desi Arnaz is playing." You know, it's very, yeah. He looks great. Overall grade.
My overall grade for this episode, it's tough. I'm gonna go ahead and because there was some really weak segments, but they weren't terrible. And there were some really high highs, though. So I guess internally, I have to let that level out. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10.
For me, based purely on aesthetic and how it made me feel, it was a 10. But I can't do it that way because everything can be 10s and 0s. I really love someone from the old guard showing up on this. And I loved the enthusiasm and the joy he brought and gave. There was a lot of appearances by the writers tonight, which I always like. I laughed a lot. I loved the music. It was the best ending, but it wasn't perfect. It absolutely wasn't perfect. There was too much Lucy. It was a weak weekend update. It was awfully flat. The cigar deal was flat, and the Untouchables was a bit too long. So it was a fight. It was head or heart on this one. But I will go to bat and say that I'm giving this one an 8.5. It's definitely my favorite episode to date.
Is that your highest ranking so far?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Incidentally, D gave the star of the night to Lorraine Newman, who we both definitely slept on during this conversation. She did some great work tonight.
True. She's probably my least favorite of the Jane, Gilda, Lorraine. But that's not to say, come on, look who she's in there with. It's not to say she's bad at all at what she does. And not to say that's why she was just lost in this episode of just a huge personality. But yeah, you're right. We slept on her. She was very competent. And certainly in hindsight, I loved it. I love her vampire thing.
Yeah, she did great work. So when you take our scores together, you gave it a 7, I gave it an 8.5, and D in our previous recording gave it a 7. That gives us a average of 7.5. Now, compared to the IMDb, gave it a 7.2. This is actually the first time we liked an episode more than the IMDb people did.
Wow.
Considering who the guest host is and my interests and your interests, that is no surprise. Some 14-year-old who's like, I don't know who Desi Arnaz is. I'm not giving it 3. So no. Yes. I'm glad this is the one we like better than the populace.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, this is the 9th best episode of season 1 according to IMDb scores, which again I think is a reasonable expectation considering who the IMDb users might be.
Everybody has those waves, like it depending on your favorite cast will reveal how old you are and what you grew up with. And I'll have more to say about this in 10 years when we get to more modern times.
Yeah.
But,
Or
and especially when the sketches start ending up on YouTube. I have a lot to say about that.
So our next episode will be out in about a week. It's Jill Clayburgh and Leon Redbone. Andy Kaufman will be back, and it's the debut of Mr. Bill.
Mr. Bill, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun episode. It's also for us. We'll be welcoming a guest host to come in who will be providing a new look at things. So that should be great. So until then, we ask you to watch your step around the molten hot fire pits as we conga line around the magma here in SNHell.